a dream that we'd all die for, a reason for us all to live and something we could fight for. I might just help a man up to his feet or hold a newborn, but no matter what I do, my hands remembering my rifle.
Welcome to Veteran State of Mind. I'm your host, Geraint Jones, joined from the States today by Mr. BC Sanders. BC, how you doing, mate?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I'm good.
Well, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, mate. We finally made it happen. Unfortunately, not in person, because I would, quite like to do this over a beer out in the States, but c'est la vie. So, BC, can you just give people a very brief overview of who you are, where you're from, all that kind of jazz?
Yeah. So I grew up in the southern states in the U.S. and grew up punk rock, skateboarding, listening to hardcore music, a little ska in there, some swing. Always listening to punk, always listening to music. It's pretty important in my life. I barely graduated high school, went in the Army, did 4 years in the infantry with the 101st, and that allowed me to go to college and get a degree in psychology. So I graduated debt-free and then became a cop of all things, and I've done police work now for almost 20 years. Mostly focusing on gangs and homicides, aggravated assaults, that sort of thing. So like my heavy focus is what I always call cop work, or like police work that doesn't involve writing speeding tickets or some of the stuff like that. It's like really in-depth gang investigations, homicide investigations, flipping gang members into informants. And when I say doing gang work, I don't mean just Bloods wear red, Crips wear blue. I'm talking about getting in-depth, understanding how the rank structure works, hand signs, lingo, everything. To include when I look or encounter a gang member or am looking at an organization, I can explain how the hierarchy is working and how the leadership is operating, whether they're pushing any type of violence against other sets or if they're more of a money-making pyramid scheme type. And then we can kind of triage who we would want to focus or who we want to disrupt their organization. So any type of police work I'm talking about comes from that perspective. And also growing up in a punk rock scene where I question everything. So if I'm questioning something and it makes sense, then I'm loyal to it 100%. Let's go. If I'm questioning things and I don't get logic or reason behind it, I'm moving on and doing something different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so let's talk about that music thing, mate, because I think that's really interesting, because a lot of people, I think especially Brits, would think, oh, this punk rock thing is just about being destructive,
Yeah.
But you're talking there about questioning things, logic and all that. Can you explain a bit more about that, please?
Yeah. So, and you're right, like growing up, and so my era of punk would have been in the mid 80s when I first got into it. I mean, I was young. I was like 10 years old when I first got introduced to it. And it was, American hardcore. So it was bands like Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, Suicidal Tendencies, Circle Jerks, like that era. And from that, I started getting into more like smaller bands in the hardcore scene. And the whole push, especially out of bands from Washington, D.C. at that time, was to change your scene, to make it better. So instead of smashing bottles and, trying to tear up and destroy society, that's kind of the stereotypical thing that kind of came out of the Sex Pistols and that kind of era. It's completely different. It is understanding how your government works, questioning things, like I said earlier. When you're out in public and people know you're like this punk rock kid, like actually trying to set a good example so that someone doesn't say, oh, every kid wearing a Dead Kennedy shirt likes to smash bottles and get drunk. When actually it's like, no, I'm 14 years old and watching the news and questioning things and reading and going, oh, why is that this is happening? Or if there was a lot of, friction or static between punk rock kids and police, so there was always that stereotype of being anti-police and hating the cops and stuff. So I was always looking at it going, well, why is that? Why is that cycle? Why does that happen that way? And usually it comes from your own personal experiences with the police and going, yeah, that cop wasn't too cool about that. Or why did they just search us? I've got no clue why I just got pushed up against a wall and frisked when I was like, 15 years old at the show. So that sort of thing. And then just always staying in the music scene and being motivated by that. Like I don't play instruments. I can't sing, but I just love listening to a band that cares about things and that is sincere about what what the music they make. The music's not being made to make millions of dollars. You know what I mean? It's not going to be some pop single hit or something that everybody's going to stream nowadays. And, it's more about the passion of it, the sincerity, and then showing up, going to shows, and you can meet the bands, talk to the bands, and then find out, hey, how did you get into punk rock? Oh shit, we're basically the same kid growing up. You just happen to grow up in New York or California or England or Wales or wherever. It's like punk is everywhere. It may just be different facets of it, but for me, it was always the positive side of it.
So where did that inquisitive nature come from? Or I say inquisitive nature, I suppose I'm kind of trying to answer my own question here. That inquisitive personality trait in you, was that put into you through the music, or do you think that you came across the music because you were already asking questions about, like, the big questions about, like, how does this all work?
Right. Yeah, no, it was the opposite. I was a really quiet kid prior to that. So, from kindergarten to about fourth grade, kind of kept to myself, but I have an older brother. And so my older brother and all his friends were into like heavy metal. So at first it was like Dio, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, bands like that. That I just kind of listened to, and I liked the sound of it. But the only thing, like maybe Iron Maiden, I started getting a little motivated about history. But other than that, it really didn't trigger things the way when I first started listening to punk. So I really didn't question a whole lot of things before that, because I was still kind of young. Like 10 years old is pretty young. I'm like fifth grade, in America, that's the equivalent. So, but because I hung out with these older guys, that was like, once I started listening to it, like I always tell people, there's a band, Minor Threat, and nowadays it's great because someone can Google it and go, wow, this band Minor Threat, let's read some of the lyrics. And then you start to understand they're singing about being drug free. Or basically like being alcohol free. Like don't go out and get drunk and then just tear up things or tear up your life, which was kind of counter to what I was seeing a lot of, at that time. So for me, I think it just kind of, it kind of rang true. Like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. But then from that, like I said, like with Dead Kennedys and other bands like Crass, and, you start to get into all these different bands and going, okay, well, their perspective is different, or someone is singing about, socialism versus capitalism or whatever it is. And it just opens up this, like, at questioning everything. So for me, I don't know that I was hardwired to question things. I think it just became very interesting at that young age, but hell, the rest of my life, I'm still doing that. I'm still questioning everything and saying, wow, 20 years ago, I could have told you something very, like very confident, but now I'm going, wow, after 20 years, maybe we shouldn't do this approach in life, or maybe things are a little different.
It's very hard to turn off that tap once it's going,
Yeah.
Because one question, it very rarely gets you an answer, it just gets you more questions.
Yeah.
Just before we talk about what drove you towards the military, so obviously being a questioner is kind of your personality. Would you say that growing up in the South, that imprinted a certain kind of code on you, a certain kind of ethos, as a young man?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because the stereotypes, and I think they're still to this day, people still believe if they're in the United States of America that the Southern states are inherently racist, right? Like that is still a burning topic in America now, where when I was a kid growing up, that wasn't even on our radar. I mean, we were kids that were growing up in, the 80s and early 90s where everybody was getting along. Like I could literally, I've dated, black women, Brazilian, Puerto Rican. Like I could date anybody I wanted to. Nobody really cared. That wasn't a thing. Now the older generation, obviously, it was rampant, and you had, laws and structures in place back then. But for me growing up in the South, it wasn't that way. But what was instilled in me was you stand up for people when they get bullied, right? You don't just sit back and let people get taken advantage of. You work hard. So like I started priming tobacco, which means I was in a tobacco field, pulling tobacco leaves off of a plant, putting them under my arm. And then when I get an armful, putting them on a trailer, and then we go put it in a barn at about 120 degrees, right? I mean, it's like hard work. I started doing that at 13 because I could get paid by a boss man for like $5 an hour. So I was rich as hell when I'm like 13 years old, and learned, if I work, I can make money. And I don't know if that's the same for everyone else throughout the U.S., but in the South, because of the agricultural background, you could always find work even at a young age. So in all my life, I've been that way. Whatever job I've always got something else going on the side that either brings extra income or is just interesting to me. So for me, that was probably what kind of was ingrained, so to speak, from the Southern culture. But the whole racist thing like that, we were past all of that. You know what I mean? And even in going into the military, which we'll talk about later, but going into the military was the same thing. Like, I'm meeting people from all over the world. You know what I mean? And everyone is basically green. You're camouflaged. Like, nobody cares what race you are. It's like, can you do the job? Or if you're a leader, can you lead? That's it. That's all we focus on.
So how did you end up then, not just joining the military, but in particular joining the infantry and 101st, that'd be an airborne division, right?
This is where anyone who's listening to this that's in the American military is yelling leg at me, you know, like, because we were an airborne unit historically, and then in 1973 they changed the airborne status and started redesignating as like air mobile or air assault. So it started becoming like helicopters, rappelling, you know, everybody's yelling dope on a rope and stuff like that. But for me, like, so I was a young guy growing up. I had relatives that were in the military. I knew that school for me at that time was not it. Like, I did not do schoolwork. I thought that people who were born smart were the ones getting A's. I just happened to not be born smart. I had a little bit of a reading problem with reading comprehension, so I just kind of gave up on that. And in high school, it was just like, let me just graduate, and I want to go in the Army. And so in those tobacco fields, I met a guy who was the equivalent. It was an E7. He was a sergeant first class. And this guy had grown up in Section 8 housing, like government provided housing. He had brothers and sisters. He's seeing a lot of crime all around him. He had no clue what life was going to be like for him if he stayed in that environment. And he said he just woke up one day, signed up for the military, and joined the Army. And that guy would take 30 days of leave every summer, come to our state where he grew up from the Army, and then work in the tobacco fields for 30 days. Like, that was his vacation. That's how hard this dude was. But some of the guys I worked with were smoking weed and getting drunk and like passing out in the tobacco fields. So you'd have to like pick them up, throw them in the back of a pickup truck, and go get them to the shade. But this guy was like, he asked me, and he's like, "Hey, what's life going to be like for you? You know, you're a young guy. Look around. These guys are 16, 17. You got 40-year-old men out here too they're alcoholics, that are drug users. Do you want that for your future? Because that's what happens very quickly unless you get a plan in place." So, man, that just started this conversation of like, okay, I was always interested in the Army because of movies and playing, you know, toy guns and stuff when I was a kid. But now this guy's putting it into reality, like, hey, this is what it did for me. What do you think about that? And it put me on that path. I talked to a recruiter, joined when I was 17. So as soon as I graduated high school, bam, I was at Fort Benning. And I wanted the infantry. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to join the Army to learn a different type of skill. I just thought, I'll join the Army, get an infantry unit, do, you know, the training that I want to do and enjoy it, you know. So it worked out for me. Like, I loved it. The only drawback I had at that time was it was in the 90s, so they were downsizing. You couldn't make promotions based on hard work and merit. It was just a lot of like
dead men's shoes,
checking a box sort of. Yeah, so it was just one of those things. But I ended up doing 4 years, made E5, and then like I said, then got out. Never deployed any of that. That was during the 90s.
So much luck comes into when you're serving the military. There's some people who did 4 years in the 2000s who might have caught in Iraq and in Afghanistan and stuff. And just, yeah, there's a lot of kind of luck. I mean, it's crazy because, I mean, a lot of the young people listening to this, we have people who weren't even alive in the 90s listening to this now. Yeah. It's hard for them to get their heads around how quiet the 90s was in terms of deployments. I mean, you know, a couple of divisions went to the Gulf, but when you look at how big the military was at that point, you know, because when we just broke, you know, the Soviet Union just broken up, we had so many divisions, armored divisions, so only a couple of them got to go, or a few of them got to get used for that. But anyway, I digress. Big question is, how did you go from tobacco field, infantry, to then decided that you wanted to be a cop?
Yeah. So like I talked about earlier with the encounters with the police when I was younger, I didn't always understand why that we were being approached that way. But then it just kind of played into that cycle of that's just how cops are, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
But I did have a positive encounter where we get stopped. A bunch of us are in my buddy's old milk truck. That's what he drove. It was like an old.
He wasn't a milkman. It was just
he wasn't a milkman. He was he's like a really well-known tattoo artist now, man. He's been on like Ink Masters and stuff. So yeah, really cool guy. This dude named James Vaughn. So growing up though, he was just wild skater, punk, and one of his first vehicles was this old boxy milk truck. So we ended up going like in dumpsters, finding old couches, like a couch and a chair, and put it in the back of the milk truck. So we just ride around all day. Like we would go see bands play like Bad Brains and stuff in like other cities, and you could just relax on the couch while he's cruising. Yeah. But we had stuff stenciled on the side of the milk truck, like band logos, like DK for Dead Kennedys or whatever. And so we found out later the local cops thought we were drug dealers. They called it the candy van. Right. So they were like, oh, yeah, candy van's like, because people would come and hang out in a parking lot where we're skating and stuff. So anyway, the police stopped us one day, goes up, the primary officer makes contact with James, talks to him. What we call check-ins or like backup is the second officer. No one saw that officer over there. They end up pulling us out of the vehicle. One guy's giving us a hard time. Oh, you guys are skaters, whatever. Like we're the troublemakers. And we're all yes, sir, no, sir, whatever, because we're not trying to get jammed up. But the second officer, he's like, oh, hold up. Y'all skate? Like y'all are skaters? Like, yes, sir, because we're being respectful. And he tells the other guy, like, hey, cut them loose, man. They're skaters. They're not troublemakers. So that was the first time I had an encounter where I was like, oh, cops aren't necessarily robots. Like this guy is actually thinking we're cool because we skate, not the opposite. Like, oh, skaters are troublemakers, because we weren't, man. We weren't breaking into houses or tearing stuff up, man. We were skating and just doing our own thing, trying to make, the best of what we had going on. So that kind of put me on that path, like, hold on. If I'm interested in police work, which I was really interested in, I didn't want to just be a consumer in life, because, the music was kind of telling me like, hey, you got to do something more than just that. And I always hated watching bullies beat up people. And there were times when I jumped in and got in fights and stuff when I was in high school and younger. Like I couldn't tolerate that. So that's what got me on that path, like coming out of the Army and then going to college and going, okay, I want to be a cop and do this job, but I want to do it my way. Like I do not want to go out there and just write. And I'm not disrespecting cops who have to do this, but I did not want to go write speeding tickets or run just traffic or that sort of thing. Like for me, it was like, I want to join the police department, do what I got to do to learn as much as I can. But then I want to find the biggest, like baddest, worst problem that we have in that city and then just hammer it. So if it's drug cartels or if it's gangs or whatever it is, that's what I want to get into. I want to do that kind of work, not like just because I've been on the receiving end of that. Like I don't want to just get tickets and stuff like that. To me, I don't want that. Like I want to look back like I do now and look back and go, hey, I've been able to do a lot of really cool assignments, do a lot of stuff, understand multiple gangs, and then be able to teach people the techniques that I've used in the field, in order to be better cops and to actually address their gang problem instead of just spinning their wheels, making random drug arrests. It's like focus on who's selling the drugs, who are caught in the cycle of violence. So that's kind of how I started getting, tracked into that with police work. Was like, I want to do this. So after getting my psychology degree, I got on with the department I'm on now, and having that military background to kind of get a little older, get some leadership under my belt, learning how to operate weapons and that sort of thing, to then doing the psychology background in college, just merge those two to when I got on the street. It was like, cool. That's what I want to deal with is the violence. I don't want to, I'm not really concerned with the other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like I want some grandmother in a neighborhood to tell me who the meanest guy is in the area. And if he's into violence, hey, let's do what we can to get him out of the neighborhood.
So going into, obviously, I don't want you to give specifics of what areas you're talking about, but can you give an explanation of what the area was like that you first started working in?
Yeah. So my first beat is what we call it. Like, in certain departments, the beat is just like a small geographical area, an AO, an area of operation. This is where I am every day answering calls. Because early on, as in police departments, you have to be a patrol officer first. So you answer 911 calls, where you address whatever problems are in your area. The actual neighborhood that I first patrolled in was the neighborhood that guy I told you about in the tobacco field. He grew up in that neighborhood. So it was a lot of Section 8 housing or a lot of government provided housing, drug dealers on the corner. So at that time, crack was still big. Heroin was just starting to kind of take off. So like when I would come on the patrol, I would hit certain blocks in my patrol car riding single. We don't have another officer with us. We have to ride single in a car. You turn a block and it's the same areas. We had 10 guys out there just posted up. That's what they did all day. Sold cars to car, or people walking up. So that's how I just started learning things. It was like on patrol. Okay, here, these 10 guys on this block, I can go 3 streets over, same 10 or 15 guys on that block. And what I started to see early on, and it was new to our city, guys wearing like red bandanas, folded up a certain way on a certain side of their body and all this. So you start to see these early indicators like, this looks like a gang. So that I would start asking detectives and senior officers, hey, what's this stuff? It looks like red's blood. Maybe these guys are blood gang members. And they would just kind of tell me like, shut up, rookie, go back to, go back to work. Don't worry about that. They're a bunch of wannabes. This is the South. This is not LA. We don't have Bloods and Crips. The drawback was these were Bloods and they were an actual gang. You know what I mean? And they're carrying guns and then they start popping off at other people. And then you've got escalating violence, which you could watch it while I was on patrol, it was just getting worse and worse because we were not addressing it as a city. So that's how I first started getting into gang work as a patrol officer. Like I would see it, but my thing is because I'm inquisitive and I don't fear people, and I definitely don't fear the unknown. I actually want to learn more about it. I just get out of my car and start talking to the dudes. Like you just kind of walk up and just start, like what they say, like chopping up. I just say, hey, what's up? What's going on today? And for them, a lot of times they were not used to that. They were used to what they called, years ago, heavy handed. Cops get out of the car. Oh, you're standing out in the middle of the street, you going to jail. Click, click, handcuff, taking them to jail. So it's like all these small charges that was just conditioning the gang members to hate the local officers, right? Where I would just kind of come in and just, I wasn't worried about arresting them on the small things. I wanted to build the rapport and understand what was going on. So also then when I would have the encounter with them, they wouldn't necessarily either hate me personally or they wouldn't understand what was going on. I would always tell them, hey, look, you got warrants, you're going to jail, I'm going to search you, this is what's going on, and then also have like side chatter, like some side talk, like why are you hanging out here all day? Like you're a smart dude, you're 19 years old, you're just going to do this the rest of your life, selling 20 rocks on a block, dodging bullets, and so talking to people on a personal level, guys will begin to open up. And so I would just learn a lot of stuff from them. And in turn, the more I would learn from them about the gang itself, like hand signs, lingo, so if they say certain code words, once I learned those code words, I could then understand how they're talking. So then when I would encounter someone and would say, hey, I know all about this or that, or I might throw a hand sign just playing around with them. And they're like, how do you know that? How do you know B's up? How do you know East Side? How do you know that's our set? It's like, oh man, everybody knows that. No, everybody doesn't know that. Nobody's supposed to know that. Like who's snitching kind of thing, So it just slowly built on that. And then through each year, I was always looking at what's the next step. So I did a few years on patrol like that in that type of environment, and then moved on from that into an actual gang unit as we established that in our department. So that got really hyper-focused then to just working gangs themselves. Wherever they went throughout the city, that's where we would go. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you saw almost like, these gangs start popping up in a neighborhood. Hey, that's where we're going to go. We don't just stay in this neighborhood. We go wherever they go.
I suppose that's something about, going over and talking to a gang is people's perception would be, there's no way that a gang member is going to talk to a cop or whatever. But you think about it, the entire thing about gangs is they're built on hierarchies, right? And structures. So there's that ingrained built-in thing in people in gangs that they recognize authority and they recognize rank structures, right?
Yeah.
So is it something you found that when you deal with people, generally speaking, in these things, if that there is a mutual kind of respect for rank and structure and that kind of hierarchy?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is because of the way the South is set up, we have gangs from all over the U.S.
Right.
So when I say like gangs, so if someone hears gangs, they think their own perspective. So it may be like, oh, they've only dealt with Latin Kings. So whenever I'm talking about gangs doing this, they go, oh, well, that's not how Latin Kings operate here in Chicago or wherever. It's like, okay, well, cool. All gangs are a little different. Most gangs do, like you said, they respect rank structure, hierarchy, and more than anything, they respect when you show them respect. It's like if I get out of the car, like I said, and a guy's already got a warrant, it has nothing to do with my charges. He may have gone out and smacked somebody across the head with a bottle, and now he's got an arrest warrant for assault. I see him, I know the warrant's good, and I'm like, damn, I got to take this dude to jail on his warrant. When I make contact with him, if I explain to him, hey, you got this warrant, it's got nothing to do with me, but I got to take you to jail. Like, so we can talk, and you want me to give your money out of your pocket to your girl standing there or whatever it is, or your phone, like you want her to take all your property. Cool. Yeah, there you go. Right. Like little bits of, I don't know how to explain. It's almost like just doing someone like a favor. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to do that, but it's the small things like that. It's just like, you're a human being and I'm a human being. I've got my rank. I've got to follow certain orders necessarily, but in the world of police, it's all a lot of it's discretion, So like that guy's got a warrant. I've got to take him to jail on it, but that doesn't mean I have to go, no, all that stuff's in your pocket is staying with you. No, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll wait 5 minutes. Your girl pulls up, here's his money, here's his phone. He didn't do anything stupid. He's at, like trying to help him out. Like he's not out here, running and gunning and doing dumb things. Yeah. But like I said, yeah, most gangs do recognize. So they may be, third, fourth level supervision, so where they may have 30, 40, 100 gang members under them. If you hold rank, you may be able to go up and encounter this guy and show him respect and be like, look, you're a leader. I'm a leader. Your people are out here, on the block doing this. My people are responding to the calls. Like, let's meet in the middle. You don't want officers coming out here and arresting 5 of your subordinates for smoking weed in a car. Well, here's an idea. Don't park in front of the nicest lady in the neighborhood, blast music and smoke weed in your car. And then when she comes out and says, can y'all please turn the music down? You tell her to F off or you cuss her out like that, you know what I mean? Like that disrespects your set. And then you as a leader, it now shows that you can't control your people. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to control my people and I'm going to explain to them, hey, try to cut some brakes over here. These guys are just blowing off steam. It's just weed, whatever. Yeah. But in the citywide, this gang is actually not committing a whole lot of violence. So cut them a break. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But these guys over here are shooting people, stabbing people like their supervisors telling them, go put in that work. Well, let's go deal with them. You know what I mean? If they're smoking weed and they got a gun in the car, they get to go to jail tonight. Let's leave these dudes alone. However, these guys have got to show respect to people. You know what I mean? So that's one of those examples too, where as people move up in rank in police departments, they'll often kind of forget what it's like to be on the street, or they may forget like, oh, I have to sometimes step in and solve problems. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I can be an asset on the street as opposed to just sitting back and being a sergeant or a lieutenant drinking coffee in some office or some shit.
Yeah, and I suppose this is what you said earlier about the human to human thing. I definitely see it sometimes where as soon as dehumanization comes into any kind of situation, like if you dehumanize the people that you're supposed to be essentially working with, because I mean, you're supposed to be working with the community. I mean, you're working with, even if someone's a criminal and you're a cop, you're working with that group of people because the idea is to stop crime, right? The idea isn't punish for punish's sake, it's to stop crime.
Right.
So if you dehumanize someone, and if you're working from an office and you're never getting out there and you never actually, any interaction you have is kind of strictly business and it's never finding out about, what's that person? Have they got kids? How long have they been in the neighborhood for? Did they play sports in the town? Were they a good football player or something like that? If you don't have any of that, it's very easy to dehumanize people. Is that a problem that you see in law enforcement?
Well, yeah, that's like one of the number one hurdles that I try to get over or try to get officers over in some of my classes. So I actually bring in gang members in my classes, right? So I have agents, deputies, officers, and when they take the classes, they're usually off duty or they're in like regular clothes. They're not coming in uniform usually. They're just sitting in a classroom, and then I teach all these different perspectives of gangs. But when I bring in the actual gang members that are informants, they're sources that are working, their faces are covered up. I don't use their real names, obviously. I don't use their aliases even within the gang or anything. I just create a completely new name for them and just introduce them to the class. And that's one of the big things is like the students are always like, because most of these cops or agents and officers, they've never had a lot of those interactions. So like you said, if they look at it and go, oh, all I have are Crips in my city or, Sureños, it's like they fight me, I want to fight them. Like you said, there's no humanization. But then we're in a classroom and we can laugh and joke, and the gang members actually like laughing with them, or like one of the burning questions I always tell them is, tell these officers and law enforcement, like tell them what they do that pisses you off the most. Like what's something they'll do during an encounter, like a car stop or a search or whatever, that they do that could piss you off so bad, or any standing orders that you may have in the gang where if someone completely disrespects you, that your job is to basically defend yourself or to assault them, kind of thing. So once they start talking to that, the officers start to kind of get it, like, oh, maybe it is okay to say sir to somebody, or like we just said, like to explain, I'm going to search you. You're in custody. You're handcuffed. I'm going to search you. When I remove this flag, which is what most gang members will call like their bandanas, right? So if the gang still wears the bandana, if you call it a flag, which is usually what they will call it, is showing respect. Like, I know your gang culture. I'm showing you respect, but I got to remove this flag out of your pocket. I'm going to search it and I'm going to put it right back in your pocket, or I'm going to get rid of it. Whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do with it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just these small steps like that. So I always try to explain to officers and stuff that when you show someone that kind of respect, then you get it in return. And also, the strategy is when you're dealing with guys and girls in gangs, is the goal is to actually get them to realize the gang itself is using them and is going to destroy their lives. More importantly, destroy their relatives' lives, right? Because all the drama they create, and any kids they have are now going to grow up in that environment. Mm. So kids are either going to be fast tracked into the gang, or the gang member is going to go to prison and leave kids out to basically fend for themselves, right? So sometimes, depending on the gang member, the more we can talk about that aspect, the more they kind of realize, like, yeah, you're right. Like I've had guys tell me, like, yeah, my girl tells me I need to stop doing this because we got 5 kids. It's like, yeah, take care of those 5 kids, man. Like it's cool you were in the gang. Now try to like transition out. Let's move on. Work on how you're going to have an actual legitimate job, make money. So when I'm explaining that to people, sometimes I have to explain too, in order to be more human and to make that connection, it's also an officer safety issue. It's kind of hard to punch somebody in the face when you're laughing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if you have an encounter and you can joke and laugh, like I always nerd it up with guys, like I know I may look like a nerd to them or whatever, so I'll do that. I'll make fun of myself during an encounter, and the guys will laugh, and it just kind of puts everybody relaxed and not on edge necessarily. But that's a huge thing that I push, is like, it's us versus it. It's not us versus them. We're not at war with the actual gang member, right? Like, I don't even use that terminology. It's like you're trying to, every encounter, you're trying to build that rapport where that gang member understands everything that's going on. And if they're catching new charges, they understand this is why you're being charged, right? And then you show them courtesy and respect, then they know this is part of the game. Then it's not personal. Now, if an officer pulls up on a block or pulls up in a neighborhood or whatever, grabs a gang member, slams them on the hood of the car like you see in the movies, starts kicking their feet apart and making it all dramatic, and searching them and all this and being like, yeah, you're going to jail. I told you we were going to get you, which has happened in the past, right? That officers have done all that extra stuff. That now forces that gang member to, one, all their anger, where they know they don't want to go to jail, it's going to be money out of their pocket, is now going to be projected back onto that officer. Mm-hmm. And worse, it's going to be projected onto the next officer who shows up in that same uniform, who has no clue that heavy hands, who just snatched this guy up, made everybody mad. They come right into a hostile environment like that, and everybody's like, you're the same as that guy because you wear the same uniform, right? So I try to explain that to people too, that because if one gang member commits violence, maybe against an officer or a sexual offense against, a teenage girl, that doesn't mean everybody in that gang does the same thing, right? Like treat every gang member individually. And the more rapport you can build as they get a little older, a lot of them see their ways and go, no, like I've had those conversations where they're like, yeah, I remember, you're right. Here I am linked into a shooting or a murder or robbery, and all I had to do was stay at home. And instead I jumped in the car, rode around with the dudes. And the next thing you know, we saw somebody so-and-so has beef with, and now they're shooting at the guy. And all I am is a passenger in the car, but I'm lumped into this investigation, where I've had guys like that, where I've explained to them, your future is going to be like this. You're going to have this gun, or you're going to be in a car, you're going to be in a house, right in the middle of an investigation that could put you in prison for years or decades. Like, why keep taking those chances?
Guys, lend me your ears for one moment. No podcast without the sponsors. So please support these guys, because they support us. And if you're enjoying what you're listening to today, well, you wouldn't have it without these guys. Combat Fuel. They are run by veterans. They are for veterans, but they're also for civvies too. You don't have to be a veteran. They're also for serving soldiers. I know there's a bit of a thing in the military. There's a bit of a flap about the old informed sports and can I take this and can I take that without, failing CDT. Everything that's in Combat Fuel is pucker. Will not get any kind of like failed CDT or anything off the back of that. But don't just take my word for it. Speak to the guys themselves. Combat Fuel are really great about, they're not one of these companies where they have people that selling you stuff don't actually know anything about what's in it. They know the ins and outs of their products like no one else. Talk to them about it. Ask them if you want to know about creatine. Ask them about creatine. Ask them about creatine, how creatine works. Ask them if it's right for you. Tell them what your training plan is. All that kind of stuff. If you're interested in pre-workouts, tell them what kind of training you do. Ask them what products are right for you. They will be really responsive guys. They want to help you with your training. They're not just trying to sell you anything. So check them out at Combat Fuel. And if you use the code VSOM when you go to checkout, you'll get a discount on the back of it as well. As I say, guys, they're great guys. They sponsor the podcast. If you're enjoying today, you have Combat Fuel, so thanks for it. So check them out at Combat Fuel or combat-fuel.co.uk. We're also brought to you by Zulu Alpha Straps, long-time sponsor of the podcast. They love us long time. We love them long time. What can you say about Zulu Alpha Straps that hasn't been said already? This is what I ask myself whenever I come to doing a fucking advert. And you know what? I'm just going to give it to you straight, guys. If you have a watch, you want a nice strap on there, which is going to keep it secure, which is going to look the dogs do lollies. That is what Zulu Alpha Straps do. They are worn by frontline operators around the world. If you want to see some sexy photos, because they do say a picture paints 1,000 words, then go and check them out at Zulu Alpha Straps on social media, ZuluAlphaStraps.com. They have sexy pictures in there, maybe you get off on seeing a picture of a helicopter coming into landing with a nice watch and a watch strap on there. If so, Zulu Alpha Straps is your place. They do a lot of stuff for veterans. They like sponsoring this podcast. They do stuff for people in war zones, like they've done recently the fundraising drive for people in Ukraine. They do a lot of good stuff. So your money is going to right good places. And yeah, what can I say, guys? Zulu Alpha Straps, check them out. Zulu Alpha Straps and Combat Fuel, long-time sponsors, long-time friends. Check them out down in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Like one of the questions I ask gang members, like, how many years do you want to do in prison for your gang? And a lot of them will be like, man, I'm not trying to do a day one from my gang. It's like, well, then keep that mindset. Every decision you make needs to be based on how much time you're willing to do in prison for this gang. And if you're not willing to go to prison for the gang, why are you still in it? And if it's all a money thing, then there are other ways to make money. You know what I mean? And I'm not encouraging people to sell drugs, but it's like there are plenty of people that sell drugs out there that aren't in a gang. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of a weird realm to be in, but sometimes you're trying to just break through these barriers and explain to guys and girls, they're in a gang, like this is not the path that you want to be on. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Sure. So what is in that case? Because I'll tell you, it's weird because as you were talking about, do you want to be away for your kids? Do you want to be, do you want to be dead? All that kind of stuff. I couldn't help but thinking about all the guys I know who work on the private security circuit in Iraq and Afghanistan and now Ukraine. And it's weird because I'm thinking like, they don't see much of their kids because they, by the nature of the work, they do earn good money, which obviously kind of comes from selling drugs and stuff as well. There's good money, especially usually from the backgrounds people are from. And I thought, well, I know why those guys keep doing it. They keep doing it because they love the excitement of the job that they get sometimes. They love the camaraderie. They love the brotherhood. Is that a fair reflection of why a lot of these people join gangs?
Yeah, it's nothing more than sociology. You study it and go, hey, why do people do this? Why do people join these organizations? Why would a 17-year-old guy like me join an infantry unit that I know is going to be tough? Well, I want to challenge myself and I want to be around people that are challenged. So, and it is true, like the drama, like I'll sit down and talk to guys who have maybe been in a gang 5-10 years. And they talk about, man, nothing funner, than being in a foot pursuit. Like when they start running from the cops and they're hiding, it's like hide and go seek. You know what I mean? Or like car chases, or, if you've been on the job long enough, you run into the same guys and you're like, damn, man, you remember that time I was chasing you and I jumped that fence and cut my hand and you got away, and they're like, yeah, I smoked you that day. We're like, yeah, you got me. It's that drama of it, as opposed to being in that lifestyle and then all of a sudden, sitting at home and doing domestic things. Like a lot of these guys are like, no, that's not me. And maybe the same way people are in the military. It's like, hey, this is what I enjoy. It's tough for me to transition and go home and to be in a completely like domesticated day-to-day operations. Like I'm not used to that sort of thing. So it is true. It's almost like a lot of gang members have to mature. It's like their brains have to catch up and go, okay, I'm 21 now, or I'm 25 now. Like I can't keep doing this stuff. And there's a breaking point where it's like no longer, it's not fun. Or like I've fortunate where I've heard recordings of gang meetings and you hear that upper echelon that are like, hey, we can't handle it. Like these young guys don't follow the rules. They don't listen. They're reckless. They're out there popping shots at people, making it hot, like making the area where all the police come in and they're getting frustrated. It's the same thing that you may hear in the military or any organization where supervisors are like, yeah, the subordinates aren't doing what they're supposed to, and it's creating a lot of problems, for the organization. But it's one of those things that the rituals, like when I got promoted in the Army, you get your rank beat into your collar, you get these pins jammed into your neck and blood's trickling down your chest. But hey, it's like one of the best days of my life when they get jumped in. They get beat in and then everybody starts hugging them. They now feel like there's this rite of passage. They were this citizen before. They're just some kid in a neighborhood, but now they're part of this gang that has power and respect. And now people are like, oh, wow. The same way a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old leaves their neighborhood, comes home from basic training, everybody's like, damn, yeah, that person's all chiseled up. They're in shape. They're walking upright. You know what I mean? Like there's just a different vibe about them. And then now they get to say, I'm part of this unit, and just depending on the unit, then the image is just that much greater. So it's the same thing, man. It's just like people are looking at it and going, okay, there's this gang that's kind of known for this. There's this gang, and then they join the one that for whatever reason speaks to them. They go through those rites of passage, and it's same thing. Sociology 101.
And like you said earlier, mate, like, the gang will kind of chew you up and stuff. And well, it's kind of what the army does.
Yeah.
Like the army really isn't your best mate when it comes to looking after you on the back end. But is it fair to say that there's kind of like, at the end of the day, I have to caveat this or people will be getting the wrong idea. Obviously, anybody that goes out, pulls the trigger, is responsible for what they're doing. Bottom line. Mm. However, is there a real missed opportunity with a lot of these people? I imagine a lot of them are quite bright. A lot of them have got courage. A lot of them are obviously, want to be part of a team or a group. Because I'm a full believer, mate, that a certain amount of people in every generation are born with some kind of wiring that makes us want to be that kind of wild troop of monkeys that's like running around fucking shit up. And that's why not every young man or woman ends up in the army. Fewer still end up in the infantry. And, you can look at an area, not everyone goes into gangs, but there's a certain, for whatever reason, what's going on, nature, nurture, whatever. There's a certain amount of us that end up in the military, end up in the infantry, end up in gangs, always has been. And, I've always said this. We've had guests on who are British Army or American military, and a lot of us say, like, look, if we'd have been brought up in Pakistan, probably would have gone and joined the Taliban, and I'd been on the other side. It's just a question of where you're born.
Right, yeah.
Is that something that, do you see that you do think, like, God, what a waste of, like, kind of human potential with a lot of these guys?
Yes. And that, and so for me, since every time I encounter some gang member, that's the first thing I'm assessing is like, what is it that, like, what is their potential? There are some guys, man, that they love violence. Like they got $2 in their pocket, but man, they really just want to go put it in. They want to go shoot somebody, fight somebody. And if you had time to really study them, they'd be antisocial personality disorder, or the AKA psychopath. Like they can't feel guilt or remorse. They just thrive on that violence. The good news is that's a very small fraction, at least of the gang members I've encountered and working in the South. So people, like you said, I think are hardwired to that. I think there is something in them because it's very hard to just wake up one day and go, oh, I want to go join a gang. Right. So like I'll always ask gang members like, okay, one, what can I do in as a cop or detective or whatever? Like, what can I do to prevent a 13-year-old from joining a gang? And they're like, there's nothing you can do. Well, how could you can't prevent that? Like, you can't do it. Their own parents and grandparents can't prevent them, or their guardians, whoever. Like, they want to join, and each gang member always says, like, the same way I wanted to join. There's certain things they said that drew me in, and I joined, and then that's it. Like, nobody could have stopped me from doing it. The same way no one could have talked me out, and they did. They tried to talk me out of the Army. People were like, hey, you're too nice, you're too low key, you're too quiet, relaxed. But I knew inside, like, no, this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you're right. It's a personality template that people are drawn to it. And I have met gang members that I'm like, man, if you would get a regular job, like all your personality traits, you're charismatic, you always make everybody laugh. Like every time I pull up, there's like 8 dudes sitting around, you're telling a joke, you're holding court. You know what I mean? Like that's why everybody loves you. That's why you're not getting shot and killed out here. Like if you had a job and did and use those traits, you'd probably make more money than any of these fools put together and have a normal life where you're not living in this day to day. And I see gang members too that join, and then they're like in the military, you have somebody joins the infantry, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this lifestyle's not for them. You know what I mean? And it's sad, but it's like there are those types. So there are people that join the gang and then realize very quickly they're not built for that life. But a lot, like certain gangs, not all of them, but certain gangs won't let people just leave. You know what I mean? So like some gangs will be like, no, this is it. You're in it for life, because they know some of the secrets about the crimes. Where other gangs have gotten really smart and have been like, okay, this dude's not working out, and he wants to, like they'll say, like he wants to lay his flag down, or he wants to step out of the gang. Like, let's let him go. Because if we hang on to him, he's either not going to pull the trigger, his heart's not going to be in it, or they're going to flip this dude into an informant or a source, and now he's going to work for, the opposition or work for the police or whatever. Mm-hmm. So some sets are like, you don't want to be in the gang, go on. No hard feelings. They don't want to create an enemy. They just let that person go. So it all depends. Like, I mean, I deal with, gangs that originate from LA, from Chicago, and even from New York. So each gang operates a little differently, but that type of mindset, like when I was in the Army, hey, it was a 4-year contract or 3-year contract. Even the guys that didn't adapt, they couldn't just raise their hand and go, hey, I want to go home. The sergeants aren't going to be like, cool, you're right. It's like, no, you signed this contract, you're in it, at least for your enlistment. Yeah. Unless they're so their problems were so egregious, then yeah, they may get chaptered out of the Army or something. But it's the same thing.
So what are some of the other reasons or some of the other things you look for in people that you're looking to flip from gang member to, well, still gang member, but an informant?
Yeah. So, and I teach this too, and it's sometimes it's easier for people to grasp if they're just an extrovert. So if cops are really outgoing, it's easier for them to do that. But when they're assessing, you're looking for a multitude of things. So some people do it strictly for money. So if you do the pitch right, and you're watching people from a distance, and I won't go into all the techniques we use, but you're like, oh, okay, this guy kind of meets that template. Let's approach him. So we've approached people, like when I was on these plainclothes assignments and task force and all that stuff. You approach gang member in regular clothes. Maybe I got a goatee or whatever, wearing Vans tennis shoes and some band t-shirt or whatever, and just go out and be like, look, I'm this person. I'm part of this team. I've been watching you for a while. You're in this set. This is your rank. This is how long you've been in the set. This is how many girls you have kids with. This is where your grandmother lives. Like, I know so much about you, and I know what your future is going to be. So now that you know, I know everything about you, but that this is the type of guy I am. I'm not heavy-handed. I'm not trying to put you in prison for life. Like, you're not my number one problem, but I want to offer you this. Do you want to work and cooperate? And if so, this is what it looks like. If you don't want to work and cooperate, no hard feelings, boom, free to go do your thing. But understand, if I know this about you, I know this about everybody in your organization. And now think to yourself, how many people in your organization are willing to do what I'm offering? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, the ones that want to stay silent and not cooperate, at the end of the day, when everybody starts catching charges, they're going to be the ones that go to prison. Where, you cooperate, maybe you get paid for your work, or maybe you're working off some existing charges. However it works out, but also know that I have the ability to teach you how to do a job interview, how to tie a tie. You know what I mean? Like, how to be a better person. Like, it doesn't have to be like in the movies. This is not a damn TV show where, we're going to be slapping people in the back of the heads and be like, oh, you're going to work or you're going to go to prison. Like, no, that's movie stuff. It's silly. So that type of approach, a lot of guys are like, I'm on board, or, hey, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I got to figure a way out of all my problems, Mm-hmm. So it's that it's looking at either people have that personality type where they're just kind of logical, or they're not the ones out there running around in the middle of the street smashing bottles over people's heads and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they're kind of low key. Some guys will end up holding rank and want to get to that next level. And so you find out from one of their meetings, oh, that dude didn't make rank, like he's getting passed over for promotions. Spies in countries and military, like that's how people get flipped too. It's the same thing in a gang. Yeah. They get disgruntled and realize I can't make it to that next level, or the gang itself is starting to use me. So I'm going to use them. This is my ticket out, So a lot of that is just, and you can't get to that level if all you ever do is sit in a patrol car, or all you ever do is put handcuffs on someone, take them to jail. You got to talk to people. There have been people that I've talked to who were friends of somebody or former girlfriend of, and just talk it up. Like, hey, what's this dude about? And they'll tell you like, oh, he's the nicest guy in the world. But when he's with that gang, he does the dumbest shit possible. Like, if he would have stayed with me, I had him tracked in with a job or whatever. So you get to see different facets or different sides of one person, and then go, yeah, that's all. That's the key to that person's success, is get them the hell out of the gang. You know what I mean? And there may be sometimes that people just say, listen, I'm willing to talk to you about the other gang I was in, but I'm not going to talk to you about the one that I'm actively in now. So in the South, we have a trend where someone will join a gang. So if there are people that are listening, they know about gangs. It may be they join a blood set of, say, 9 Trey, right? So that's blood, and then this smaller subset, like Army division is 101st, right? So it's breaks down like that. But they may be 9 Trey, and then all of a sudden they go, well, I got some problems with them. I'm going to flip to this blood set called Sex, Money, Murder. So person may have been in 101st. Now they transition to 10th Mountain. Now they're in a new division, so to speak. You know what I mean? So that person may not want to talk about 10th Mountain, but they'll tell you all about the drama and problems in the 101st. Same thing in a gang. They may say, I'm good with this set. I'm not trying to burn bridges and get people jammed up or whatever, but that last set I was in, man, they did me dirty. I'm going to tell you all about this, and this. So a lot of it is just that. It's trying to read people and understand there are certain people that are willing to help themselves, and then there are certain people that they just carry guns and and love that violence. It's like, why would they cooperate? They love this. And they're true believers too. There are gang members that like know all their code of conduct. They know every hand sign. They know every rank structure. Like, they memorize everything because they love it. They're true believers. Like, to the day I die, I'm going to be Crip, or I'm going to be Blood, I'm going to be whatever. And those people are very hard to flip because of that, because they're so bought into it.
I suppose those people, though, if they are those people who are true believers, are the ones who, if they are done dirty, quite often go down. They take it the hardest, right?
Yeah. 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 There's a great book called Monster. And it's written by Cody Scott. And he's a longtime 8-tray gangster Crip in L.A. And he wrote a book. He went to prison, wrote a book. And the book actually documents his life, his autobiography. But it's a great example of someone who he wanted to go into I think it was the Marine Corps, and something happened, didn't get into the Marine Corps. And so he joined this set of Crips, 8-tray. But then in the book, you can see what it's like when he's in 110%. Like, man, this is it, Crip for life. To even he talks about in the book going to prison and other gang members telling him like squash that, man. Like, nobody wants to hear that. We're all in here just trying to do our time and not have drama. And he's in there in the book. He talks about he's still in there talking about I'm 8-tray, I'm this, I'm that. So it's a great book to be able to read. And then as he gets older and transitions out, like what life was like for him. But it's just a good book to read and understand when someone's bought into it and what life is like for them.
So one thing, obviously, anyone that's been listening to the podcast for a while knows that I have my worries about government. I have my worries about police abusing their powers. So something you mentioned there about people working off, say, other charges and things. Is there a danger, and has it happened, and what's the kind of the safety mechanisms to make sure that things aren't put on people in order to then be like, right, well, now you have to work this off so that we can get up on the kind of like the next guy on the ladder?
If I understand it right, you're saying like that their information is accurate?
Yeah. So like, so if let's say, for instance, we've got someone wants to get to somebody that's like, let's say 4 or 5 levels up in an organization, right? And in order to do so, they need some informants and nobody's talking. So they stick some charges on somebody and be like, right, you have to work off these charges by being our informant. Even so, what I don't know if this is something that happens in this day and age and stuff. I'm sure it probably did in the past when there was probably less of a, it was like that more heavy-handed tactics that you were talking about. But is there, what is the kind of the kind of the safety mechanisms to make sure that if any kind of charges on people are legitimate and this isn't like a tactic that's just used of, right, let's put something on him in order for him to have to work that off in order to get up to this next person?
Yeah, I think that the term used to be like people would say dirtying them up or something like that. It was like you're saying, like if someone's wanting to go to upper echelon, they may focus on somebody selling drugs and be like, oh, well, let's catch them with multiple charges. Then they'll have to flip or cooperate so we can move up. And that's usually like in the drug networks. To me, if that even still goes on, that type of focus is a little backwards, because really you're gambling that person's now going to cooperate, and you're spending a lot of effort on trying to catch them with whatever drugs. So and it's not like in the movies. Usually you just don't just walk out and go, oh, I bet that guy's got drugs, and you just stop them. Like you have to build up, probable cause, or you have to build up reasonable suspicion. Like you can't just do it that way. My logic has always been, if someone has charges and then they're working them off, which is the big thing in the drug world, whatever they offer, should be better for society than what they have, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone, let's say, has trafficking amount of cocaine, but they say, okay, I've got trafficking amount of cocaine, but I was there when like 3 people were murdered or whatever, and then they give up that information that leads to the conviction of 3 murderers. I think as a society, we should be like, well, cool. That person should get a reduction because, yeah, they had the cocaine, but we just were able to clear whatever these 3 murders.
Yeah, sure.
I think what you were saying is like more like the old term was like targeting, like, oh, you're going to go after this person until you find charges on them and then hope that they flip up the chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, I forget the name of the book Jack Carr's always talking about. I think it's called like 3 felonies a day or something like that.
Okay.
It's basically, there's so many laws and books that every day we all break a law without knowing it.
Yeah.
So you can easily just find something and be like, right, now we've got you, for this. And I worry,
yeah.
I worry about that being a way of pulling in people who really weren't kind of, kind of maybe that being that damaging to society, as you say, who then end up being pulled into something where, they're then basically used as, I suppose basically when it comes down to it, I'm against people being used as pawns, whether it's by police, government, gangs, because they're all the same. So,
yeah.
kind of on that one with the informants as well. Because my suspicion here, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this could be extremely dangerous, for an informant.
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of like a bit of an ethical dilemma for you as well? As in, like, is risking this person's life and is possibly orphaning these kids worth it in order to get to the next level? How do you deal with that as a cop, as a human?
Yeah, it is tough because they are taking a huge chance by doing that. And so most guys are, like, for one, like I said earlier, like most guys are looking for a way out of that lifestyle, right? So think about like day-to-day survival. Every day they're checking in, clocking into work, and it's like, okay, all I really have to do is buy a bag of chips, get a drink, and just kind of hang out. Like it's almost like hourly thoughts, not, oh, wow, I'm 18. What's life going to be like when I'm 25? Because the frontal lobe is still developing in the brain, and without getting all nerdy. But so that whole idea of trying to help someone solve their problems as well. So that's what I mean about the approach. Now, I don't know how every other agency does their stuff or whatever. Like, there still may be people who think those approaches work. I don't know. My experience has always been, one, when people want to cooperate, they understand in that lifestyle, like, this is dangerous to cooperate. But they also know they don't want to go to prison for 20 years on some stuff that either they did or maybe they didn't do, but they're part of this problem now because they're in a gang. So, and the same thing in the drug world. Like, sadly, people get addicted to drugs. They go out there and commit a bunch of crimes like burglaries. They sell the stuff they steal in order to feed that habit. But then they get caught maybe with, like, a little bit of heroin or a balloon of heroin or something. And then maybe they're given that offer of, hey, do you want to work or do you want to hold the charge that you have? So then that idea is, oh, now they're going to give up their dealer or their source or whatever. And then, people move up that chain or whatever. To me, I think that people should be focusing on gangs in their city. And if they're selling drugs, use those drug charges to disrupt that gang so that it doesn't become so powerful. You have gangs running an entire plot of the city or an entire area of the city. We could have a discussion for 2 hours on gang laws, and
we will. We're having you back here, mate, for that.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as like informants, it is very dangerous. They understand that, and usually when they want to cooperate, it's because life has gotten so dangerous for them. They just want out. They want to try to make things better.
I should have asked you this earlier. I'm an old man now. I keep forgetting this. But how old are we talking about in kind of when we talk about gang members, obviously generalizing here, what are we kind of talking about in terms of age for a lot of these guys?
So for me, my experience, it started out, dudes were 15 to like 20 years old, right? Because the gangs were just starting to like pollinate down here in the South. But now you've got, because so many people have moved to the South as well, I've met guys that are 45 years old that are from Los Angeles and who've been in a gang since they were 15, because LA's gang problem goes back for decades. The same thing with Chicago. I mean, you're going back to the 50s. But for me, most of my encounters have been young men and women, so probably 15 to about 25. So that's and that's also that age where, like I said earlier, impulsive, you're doing really crazy things sometimes because the brain isn't fully developed.
And you mentioned, the dangerous side of it. I mean, how often are you coming across homicides, where in your line of work? Like, how often do these guys that you met on the corner, how often these guys turning up dead?
Yeah. So, it waxes and wanes. It comes and goes with, who's active and who's not. So I've seen guys at, 15, 16, 17 years old, and then by 20, they're shot and killed on the block. Or in the same area they hang out because they're there every day. They're become an easy target, and that's tough. I've had a guy who was shot and asked an officer to get me. I was on the scene, but I was, out near the perimeter, and he had asked for me by name because he knew me. I would always see him every day. We would laugh and joke. And when I would start putting on weight, he'd tell me, man, you getting fat as hell, And when he'd start putting on weight, I'd be like, you getting fat as hell, Like we showed that mutual respect. Sadly, he had been shot, and he had asked for the officer to get me, like for the, hey, get him to come over here and call me by name. And the officer turned to go get me. I was dealing with some other stuff, And the next thing you know, the guy codes out, you know. So to me, that always kind of bothered me because I thought, I don't know if he knew in his mind something's not right and I'm checking out of this world, and maybe he just wanted someone to be near him that he knew, even though I'm a cop. Or maybe in his head he thought, I'm going to be good, you know, the ambulance or EMS is taking care of me or getting ready to take care of me, but I want to tell him something. I don't know what he wanted to tell me, and it always kind of bothered me that way. Even though that guy was a gang member, he's still a human being. He was funny, you know. Like I said, he'd be on the corner and we would always laugh and joke. But it was just one of those things that always bothered me. So stuff like that, like seeing kids, especially the older I get, watching kids grow up into adults, and even seeing them doing homicides and then going to prison for the rest of their lives. And even some guys I don't even know, but I look at their age and go, man, what do we got going on with a 15-year-old or 17-year-old, whatever, is opening fire on other people, shooting and killing them randomly, spraying bullets, and now they're going to be in prison the rest of their lives. Like, you know, and some people get mad at me about that, but it's like still looking at a human being and even knowing what their potential was growing up, or even encountering them and going, they didn't have to live a life like that. They chose it, and now they're gone, which has that ripple effect, like we mentioned earlier, on their kids, their family.
Well, I think being honest comes into this as well. And a lot of us, especially as military guys, we're honest. We think there's definitely a situation where we could have been talked into doing something like that at 15.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. I mean, there were fights and stuff that I got in when I was a kid, and I'm like, damn, I look back and go, well, you know, I wasn't in a gang. I didn't have people with guns, but would things have been different if I were, 15 and hanging out with older guys and they carried guns and we had beef with someone and they gave me a gun? Would I have done something that stupid? I mean, I probably wouldn't because of the way I grew up, but that mindset, I was willing to take, punch somebody or kick somebody or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, we were still fighting. There's still aggression between people. And maybe I didn't even know that person, and maybe they were the aggressors, like skating and stuff. People would start fights with me, but it's crazy. It creates a horrible sphere in neighborhoods where kids are getting fast tracked into it. And it's messing with society across the board. Like, you can look at every city in the U.S., and you've got one right now. You still got the remnants of defund the police. You've got a less proactive police departments throughout the U.S., which has allowed gangs to operate unchecked. And so you see that spike in violent crime. And I don't mean like violent crime's up 10%. I mean, it's like hundreds of percents. You know what I mean? Like some cities are tripling their shootings and homicide rates. And people are scratching their heads going, how is this happening? Well, it's easy. When you don't disrupt an organization or you don't focus proactively on some of the most violent people in your city, watch what happens. So guys that are known to carry guns will carry them every day now because they're not getting stopped. They're not seeing police on the block. They're not seeing or hearing multiple arrests within their gang. Because imagine, you show up to a meeting as a gang member and there's 50 other gang members, and for that meeting, you got to talk about how you're going to get money on the books or put money in a person's account in jail because 5 of your members just got caught on federal gun charges or state gun charges. Now that becomes the topic of the gang. Well, if people aren't getting arrested, the topic now shifts to who they have beef with because they're not in self-preservation mode. They're not flat, they're not in defensive mode. They're now going, look, everything's good. We don't have people locked up. Our money's building up. Like, who do we want to take out? Let's deal with this dude. It becomes now their motives are more offensive as opposed to defensive. Like, how are we going to take care of our people that are locked up right now?
Yeah, and when things are personal as well, which obviously losing someone is, violence begets more violence.
Yes.
And that's why I think about the whole killing thing is like, look, man, there's thousands of people in America and Britain who didn't have any personal fucking grudge against whoever they were killing in Afghanistan, and we were quite happy to pull the trigger on those people. So I have absolutely no doubt that a lot of veterans, if they were in a situation where their friend got killed and you knew where that person lived, you're going to go over there and kill that person, especially when you're in your early 20s.
Yes, so that's why I emphasize always disrupting the cycle of violence, because if you don't, it's on that person, his inner circle or his gang, like, oh, y'all just going to let that guy get shot and killed in the street? No, we're going to go handle that. So that's where the race is on, where the agencies or the departments that focus on that violence and, okay, hey, someone just got shot. Even if they don't die, but they get shot and they survive, you still have to work it, because if you don't get ahead of that rival set or whoever shot, or whoever his inner circle, he got shot, they're going after them.
Mm-hmm.
So then when they go after them, they may miss and hit an 87-year-old grandmother or whatever. And it just pops back and forth to where, like I said, that book with Monster Cody, you could study beef between 8 Trey Crips and Rolling 60 Crips in LA, Crip and Crip versus, set versus set. And it's gone on for decades, and it affects other cities just because it's like an ingrained feud, right? That's where you're seeing it going on in these cities. And like I said, when there's not a constant reminder of arrest, it's like, why wouldn't we load up 5 deep with, rifles and pistols and shotguns and just go shoot up the block? What's going to happen? They're not going to catch us, right? It becomes like their resolve is there, where you can break the resolve by doing multiple arrests and focusing all your efforts on those cases where they realize, and at some point, we just got to worry about not getting locked up. And the only way we're going to avoid that is by putting the beef aside and stop shooting everybody, because that's why they keep focusing on us. But you're right. It's violence begets violence. It's crazy.
So is it almost like a police force really should be in these situations, should be used like, it's like a smaller scale of like a Bosnia and Kosovo, where you've got different groups with different groups who have been killing each other for ages, who want to continue it, and you have to put an armed peacekeeping force in on top of it. It's kind of just like that on a town level.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the larger cities, they probably have to operate on something like that. There's got to be some constant presence, like for us in the South, because we've got so many different gangs now operating here. They may not have what we call set versus set, like gang versus gang violence, but it may be on a personal level. It may be this gang member is sleeping with this guy's girlfriend, and then they have beef, but then they bring all their buddies, into it.
Gotcha.
So that can be a problem in itself because it's all over a city, right? And it may not just be one certain area versus another area. So it's tough to also police that, because it's like things are popping up all over and you're going, wow, we just had a homicide in this zone or this district or area, and a shooting down here that are completely related, but they're in 2 different parts of the city. And this district maybe they're not aware of the problem. You know what I mean? Because it's new to their area. It's just, that's where having information or intelligence comes in, where okay, this is going on. But yeah, I have been on teams in the past where we have had to wear patrol rifles and basically do movement to contacts, like in neighborhoods, because it was getting so bad between 2 different sets. They knew where everybody stood every day. They knew where each other's relatives lived, and they lived. So houses were getting shot up, blocks were getting shot up. So we would basically have guys get into positions to do surveillance, and then we would move through what we call the cuts. In the South is like the shortcuts between houses or apartments or whatever, trailers, to get to another area. Well, in the cut, that's where a lot of stuff happens, So we would literally have 8 or 9 officers, and we would move like that. We'd have to carry the patrol rifles because we're going up against guys that have AKs or have shotguns, and then they've got the reach on us. So it's like that idea of getting surveillance in the area to go, okay, hey, I just saw him stash whatever, a pistol, in a chip bag by the back door. Okay, well, let's watch. Let's see what's going on, And then, hey, unit, go ahead and move in. Let's prone the guy out. Let's get that gun, see what's going on. Because a lot of the guys, we may already know they're convicted felons and they shouldn't have firearms, So if you can record it, and you got video of this guy pulling a gun out and messing around with it, racking the slide, and then you go in and detain him and you get the gun off of him, that's a gun charge. He's gone. He's gone for a while. But it was that idea that citizens would see it too, and see us with rifles. And you hear like people saying, oh, the police are militarized and we don't want our police militarized. It's like, we're not militarized. We're using equipment that's going to save our lives, and more importantly, potentially save the life of the citizen who was inside their living room when a gang member wants to start popping off with an AK or something. You got 7.62 going through drywall, or going through these houses. Like, that's why we have these rifles. We don't have them because we're trying to be an occupying force or whatever. We're just trying to like stop the violence and get people in custody in a safe way. We've got this rifle for a reason. It's not anything about militarization or whatever.
So one of the things is obviously this is a common theme with a lot of, gangs and crime in general, Britain, America, we got Australian listeners. I'm sure it's the same in all these places. So a common one is drugs. And I've talked about drugs a lot on the podcast. And, I'll just say this. I do also think it's quite funny that we just say drugs, because to compare, say, weed and heroin just seems pretty ridiculous in the first place. What is your kind of your experience with the quote unquote war on drugs? And do you think that the tactics have been working? What kind of evolution have you changed, really? I mean, I'm just kind of just throwing over a very broad question to you here, and feel free to interpret it however you like.
Yeah, no. This is the discussion we have quite a bit, because the running joke is when a drug unit comes in with like an arrest, like oftentimes like a homicide detective or something would joke and be like, "Oh, the war on drugs is over. You got a kilo of coke. Good job." Like, but we can look at research and go, okay, is this working or not? Right? I think the big problem is a lot of agencies that have standalone like drug units, that's all they do is drug work, is that it's often led by either complaints, like a citizen says, "Oh, I think they're selling drugs, in front of this house." So then the unit may go in there and work that house and make those drug arrests. Or an informant says, "Oh, these 3 people I buy from," and so it's almost like the units don't get to direct their action. It's directed by complaints or from informants or other information. Like I said earlier, if each department has drug units, if those drug units focus on gangs that are selling drugs, your violence will go down. At the end of the day, that's what matters. I could go out there and make an arrest and seize 18 kilos of cocaine. That's not going to matter. I mean, in the grand scheme, it's not going to matter. People are still going to be snorting coke, and doing whatever in life. Does the organization that's selling those 18 kilos of cocaine, are they part of inner city violence for your jurisdiction, for your department? You know what I mean? And I know, like, up the chain, it matters, but locally, a local drug unit, if they'll focus on violent gang members or violent drug dealers, then your violence will go down. Use those drug charges to get them off the landscape, is what I say. The idea that just go out there and you're just buying drugs or just making these drug arrests, and I'll look at someone's record and go, "Wow, cool, you just bought cocaine from a 25-year-old, who has a college degree and is working a 9-to-5 job." Okay, what difference does that make? Or you can go out there and buy coke or crack or heroin or something from the same type of dude who's 25 years old, but he's shot and killed, a person, or he's shot people in the past, or he's caught in this violence. Go focus on that side or that aspect, So I think the idea is just, if departments will focus on violent drug dealers and not necessarily success being, "Oh, I got a kilo of coke," or "I got a bundle of heroin," or like weight is what they call it in the drug world. It's like, "Oh, this guy's got a lot of weight." So what? That's my logic, is like, well, did that affect the violence in the city? At the end of the day, that's what matters. Drive that violence down. Disrupt the violence in your city. Use the drug charges to do that. Because you can't just go out there and make random arrests and it actually matter. I mean, sadly, Americans love drugs and they love to use them. I grew up around a lot of people that were using drugs. To me, alcohol is a drug too. So when I say that, I've never been drunk. Like I grew up not drinking.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
Dude,
not
so
drinking.
Rare. That's so rare.
Yeah. I've never smoked weed. I've never, but I also don't judge. My thing was music, like this whole straight edge movement and hardcore and stuff that was kind of saying like, don't drink, don't do drugs. I got in on that when I was really young and early on. It got really militant. There's a lot of people out there that'll want to beat you up because you drink, but I'm not that way. And everybody I hang out with for the most part drinks, so I'm not judgmental. It just, for me, I was like, I can't go down that path. Like I don't want to become an alcoholic. I don't want it to ruin my life. And I feel like the way my personality is, when I do something, I do it 100%. And I want a lot of it. If I like something, I want a lot of it. So I avoided it, but alcohol is the same way. I mean, you look at alcohol in America. I mean, it's tough, man. Families are broken over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And mate, this is something that I talk about all the time. And Unfortunately, I'm the same way as you. I'm 100%, but I didn't have the sense to not do drugs and drink. So for me, it became a problem.
No, I was just say I know I am the exception to the rule. You know what I mean? Like it's not like when I was in the infantry, guys were like, "Oh, you're going to drink." I said, "I'm going to tell you right now, because they were like, oh, we're going to hold you down. We're going to pour whiskey in your mouth." I said, "Okay, but 10 of y'all might be able to hold me down, but y'all got to sleep at some point." And I want to get my payback for each and every one of you. And I did tell them, like I don't want to go down that path. I've got relatives that were alcoholics, and I've got a relative that was homeless, and I would encounter him on my beat as a patrol officer and stuff. And we were close, you know what I mean, when he would sober up and come and stay with his sister. So I just didn't want that, man. I did not want to. I was always afraid if I ever started, I would not be able to stop. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I just kept that lifestyle and said, okay, let's just not start it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to go down that path. So the whole war on drugs kind of thing, the strategy has to be much different. Success is not by weight. Success is not by you can't arrest so much that you disrupt the flow of drugs.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you use your assets to focus on violent drug dealers, put that violent part in there, you drive the violence down, and then at the end of the day, it's a win-win. No one's going to argue with you when you go out there and arrest a person who has a long history of violence or is caught in a cycle of violence where they may be a shooting suspect in 3 different cases, and they're also selling heroin on the side out of a hotel. Focus on that. If it takes you a week, it takes you a week, but they're selling out of the hotel. Get that person arrested and break that cycle of violence.
I think the thing that gets missed about the war on drugs is there's supply because there's demand.
Yeah.
And unless the demand goes, there will always be supply. We're not talking about something here that exists in a limited form. We're talking usually about plants. We're talking about things that can be created in labs indefinitely. There's no scarcity. So unless you deal with the demand side of things, you will never clear the supply.
Yeah.
And that to me just seems so fucking obvious that I think, like, how do you not see that all this money that's going into taking care of the supply, well, not, and it's not even making a dent in the supply really. Like, if that's not being spent on, because look, there's people who take drugs. I've taken drugs for help, and I've taken drugs for fun. And I think everyone should have that. My opinion is everyone has the right to do what their bodies, what they want. But I would like people to only take drugs for fun, that's what I would like. I would like somebody, because I've always thought it's kind of crazy that we get somebody, we got this person, caught them with some heroin and stuff. And like, realize that person is taking that heroin because they're fucking miserable. And the only thing that's helping them exist is to stick a needle in their arm. I mean, like, just to think about it again and bring it back to a human thing of like, what got them to that point where they were like, what's the best thing for me? Shoving a needle in my arm and passing out and shitting myself. That's the best thing for me. Like, I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something here that, I'm not saying that's the case with every heroin addict. I'm sure there's some people who just want to experience something different. But generally speaking, I don't know anyone who's in a good place to try heroin.
Yeah, you're right. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I was on a drug unit is working heroin. And I hated working it because of that. But one, we were having people that were overdosing, so it needs to be dealt with. But it's so sad when you're encountering people and they're explaining to you, a prior history of sexual assaults or sexual abuse, and some people, and this, I mean, everybody, every demographic, every type of person uses heroin. So it's not a certain group or a certain population. But the running theme, like you said, is often there's something else going on in their lives that, for whatever reason, they're either trying to escape it or deal with it or whatever. It becomes just overwhelming. And so, like, one of the guys I talked with that was a heroin addict, he had started popping like oxys when he was like 15. And by 17, he was mainlining heroin, had blown one of his veins out. But he had a lot of other stuff going on in life. And so for him, for me, I just debrief him on the culture of it and how he's getting plugged into all these different people because everybody was doing heroin. And he said it started out, juveniles were popping pills because they thought prescription medication was safe. because you're not buying it off the street. But then the prescription medicine, they can't keep up with that. It's too expensive. And then they transition into a $10 bag of heroin, and then a lot of them, their lives are ruined.
And that is obviously a false premise in the first place, that what you get legally is safe.
Right. That's what I'm telling the guy, I'm like, hey, but I understand the logic.
Yeah,
at 15 is
course,
like,
yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
these are from, for him, he said the government makes them. I'm like, well, a private company makes them and makes billions of dollars off of it. And it's still something you're putting in your body that's changing the chemistry. It's changing how you react. So, but like I said, and the sad thing is now you see drug dealers who capitalize on that, and they'll package heroin in pill form so that people will go, oh, I want my heroin, but it's easier to pop a pill than to have to use a dirty needle or shoot up. Like, okay, I'll still get my hit through, this pill. So like just supply and demand. It's a business. It's, hey, what does the customer base want? They like pills. Let's press this heroin into a pill form. It's horrible, man.
It is, mate. And like I said, like I'd support anyone's right to do what they want, but I'd always think like, God, I wish that person had access to a different way of escaping that pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that if there's like, so for my uncle I mentioned earlier, he finally got sober after decades and decades of drug use and alcoholism. But the program he went through was successful because he had hit rock bottom and he had to earn his way up. Like, you start out sleeping in a room with like 50 other people on a cot. And the longer you stay sober, the more privacy you get. But the program is all run by people who were, battling the addictions as well. But that program, he said that was what was successful to him. And a lot of the stuff he was dealing with was responsibility, how to deal with life. He had a lot of other issues going on. But to watch when he was sober, the dude was hilarious, man. Like, he was like one of the uncles that we would all sit around and he'd tell us stories and make us laugh and could relate to us a lot. You know what I mean? So it always broke my heart because I saw the side of him that a lot of people didn't see, either while I was working and he was getting arrested, or when I go to punk rock shows and certain bands or a certain venue, he would panhandle outside of there. So I would see him when he was messed up, and he wouldn't even know what world he was in, asking for money. It's horrible. And I mean, like, I wish we didn't have it in existence, any type of drugs or alcohol, just for the fact I hate seeing the completely negative side of it. But I also understand departments who just go out there and try to arrest random drug dealers and try to get the most weight is just a huge, huge waste of time. And I beat that drum all the time. Like, hey, focus on the violent gang members. Focus on the areas where the violence is occurring. Stop worrying about weight. You go out there and buy one or two, crack rocks from a few people that are still selling crack. If you go buy it in an area where violence is occurring and that person's caught in that cycle, you may have deterred or prevented, a shooting from the future. Like that. That's what you just focus on. So if everybody did that, maybe you drive your violence back down. But patting yourself on the back for getting a random kilo from somebody and it's not plugged directly into violence, then at the end of the day,
if anything, the fact that you just took that kilo off the street, that money's got to come from somewhere now. That could in itself be like, all right, well, where are we going to get our kilo from? Right now, we've got to go and get it from that other gang.
Yeah. Or the person, if it gets fronted to them and now they owe that money back to the dealer, it's like that person may get killed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. They're going to, you're going to be in a fucking very desperate way of getting hold of that money.
Of getting it. Yeah.
And that usually comes with violence.
Yeah. So, and that's why I explained to people too, like once certain gangs get set up, if they charge dues, like a monthly payment for being in a gang, there are certain guys that'll go out there and do robberies just to get their money to pay to the gang. So it's like, as the gang expands, people are like, in jurisdictions are like, oh, wow. Seems like overnight we had a bunch of robberies, or we had, a lot of petty crime. It's like, yeah, you've got guys that can't even make enough money to pay their dues. So they go out there and rob a store, and you're like, dude, didn't even wear a mask. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, but because they're driven by having to pay those dues, and the gang spreads very quickly. But
Mate, it's the ripple effects of these things are amazing. BC, I could talk about this stuff all day, mate. I'd love to have you back for part 2, hopefully in person, mate.
Yeah.
Just let people know where they can find you the writing that you do, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but if you could let people know what you write about, where they can find it, and where they can find you, mate.
Yeah. So I write for Skillset Magazine, and it's like a hard copy printed magazine quarterly. And mostly I usually write historical badass articles. So it's articles about people within the military or law enforcement or just, who have done something in history that most people don't hear about. So like the Churchill Club, teenagers during World War II that fought the Nazis, much like the Wolverines in the American movie Red Dawn, but not quite on that level. But, they would set fires and harass the enemy. And they were only like 15 years old and they got imprisoned for it. So, things like that, like female spies of the SOE, from World War II that people don't talk about. They're airborne qualified and they're cutting throats and shooting Nazis and stuff. So I just try to keep this history alive in the magazine. And they're very, very, very accepting, like, hey, pitch your ideas and we'll put them in. So I love doing that. I'm working on some novel work that hopefully will get published in the near future. And then the only presence I have on the internet is Instagram. And that account I only use it's been on for about maybe 2 years, but it's just B.C. Sanders. I don't like, a lot of people will go on there and be like, oh, you never post about police stuff. I'm like, there's a little more to life than just police work. So I do post like random stuff. I try to make people laugh. If any of the listeners have questions specifically about gangs, it's a open account. So just shoot me a message. I'll answer questions. I've interpreted graffiti and stuff for some people that I was on another podcast for. So, and then Wednesday nights I do a podcast with a guy, Jason Piccolo. It's called the PA Podcast, Protagonist Antagonist. But it's on all the podcast platforms. We just talk about movies and have guests on. It's very lighthearted, funny, nothing too serious.
And I know Jason, mate, lovely dude.
Yeah.
And also, I want to translate your Instagram for British listeners. That is a B full stop C full stop Sanders. People, because we got young listeners going, period? What?
Yeah, I usually say B dot, C dot, and people are like, what are you, stupid? It's a period. And I'm like, well, in the gang world, it's like dot, just never mind.
We go translated that, mate. I'm looking forward to checking out. I want to have first eyes on those novels as well, mate, so I can steal all of your ideas.
Hey, look, like we've talked, man, I got some good stuff cooking. It's probably about 5 books total now, before I get,
Well, mate, I want to. I've got an SOE story for you as well. I'm going to send you when I get off. I've got to get off, mate, because my right is here. Because, like I said, I could chat about this all day, mate. It's been brilliant. I'm glad we finally got to do this, bro. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, me too.
And I'll catch you soon. And listeners, we will catch you soon too. Catch you next time. And we love you. Bye.
You sold a dream to all of us, a dream that we'd all die for, a reason for us all to live and something we could fight for. I might just help a man up to his feet or hold a newborn, but no matter what I do, my hands remembering my rifle.